Good morning. It's Monday, August the 7th. This is Focus on the News. I'm Senator Dick Black. And today we're going to be talking about Senator Tuberville's block that he's placed on military promotions over the issue of abortion within the military. I'm joined today, and I'm very pleased to be joined by our friend, Delegate Bob Marshall. Bob, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just to introduce you to our listeners, Bob was the original author of the very famous Hyde Amendment, which prohibits the expenditure of federal funds for abortion within federal government. He was the one who drafted the amendment, and then a Congressman, Henry Hyde, actually carried it in Congress and got it enacted. Bob has recently written an article entitled "Biden Administration Says That Abortion Restrictions Weaken the Military." And this was published in Catholic Culture this May. Bob was, for 26 years, a very, very prominent member of the Virginia House of Delegates. And he was the one who introduced and enacted the marriage amendment, limiting marriage in Virginia to one man and one woman. And then he also introduced and enacted the ban on partial birth abortion. He and I both worked on both of those pieces of legislation together, and Bob worked with me on my parental consent for abortion bill. So Bob has done some tremendous thing, and he also recently wrote a book entitled "Reclaiming the Republic: How Christians and Other Conservatives Can Win Back America." And so we have an eminent expert on this area. So when you put Bob and me together, of course, I had a military career, first fighting with the Marines in Vietnam, but then later I was an Army judge advocate and served in the Pentagon in the Office of the Judge Advocate General. And so together we both have a very keen interest in what Senator Tuberville has done. And Bob, perhaps with that, I'll just let you kick off exactly what he has done and what he's attempting to achieve.
Well, you admitted that we were co-agitators in the General Assembly of Virginia, so it was a kind of a 1-2 punch. If I didn't get something, you would immediately follow up, and we would then work together. The current controversy started with a decision by Secretary Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, to expand the availability of payment of abortions by tax money in the military. And the reason they did this is because of the decision of the Supreme Court in the Dobbs case out of, I thought, what was Mississippi, where they reversed an improper, incorrect, just a contrived ruling, Roe versus Wade, from 1973, and said states may regulate or even prohibit abortion. And a number of states have done this. Probably 13 or 14 states have very tight restrictions on abortion. And Lloyd Austin made a statement, which I think is kind of bizarre. He said that the failure to expand reproductive health care, you have to understand what that means, is terminating the life of a child before birth, quote, will interfere with our ability to recruit, retain, and maintain the readiness of a highly qualified force. Well, I could just imagine General Eisenhower in World War II telling the House Armed Services Committee, look, if you don't provide for abortion funding like the communists have for their soldiers, girlfriends, that we're not going to be able to have a Normandy invasion or an invasion of North Africa, Operation Torch, or any of these things right here, or even fight the Battle of Midway, because our guys just need to have their girlfriends to have abortion access. That, of course, is completely ludicrous. He gave no reason or rationale for claiming that. It was just an assertion, but they're proceeding forward on this. And to that effect, they are paying for, not only paying for abortions, they're paying for time off for people who go to get an abortion, and they're paying for the abortion. This is the three ways you're violating the Defense Department adaptation of the Hyde Amendment, which started in 1976, to prohibit the federal involvement in most of these circumstances. Actually, the original one started with a life of the mother exception. It was expanded later, but still, there's no authority to do this. And for years, the various appropriations bills coming out of Congress have had basically Hyde amendments attached to them if they were involved in any way of providing health services or benefits or whatever. So the civil service, you could not pay for abortion. The Indian health care, you couldn't pay for abortion. Just the foreign aid, you couldn't pay for abortion. So this was the standard policy, and Biden sought to get around that. So far, the Hyde Amendment still is part of federal law, thank God, and thank the members who have fought to keep it there. But Austin, on his own, is making these payments available, in these practices available. And frankly, when I looked at the documents that they put out, I couldn't find one from the Office of General Counsel for the Department of Defense indicating that federal law clearly allows for such purposes, because there is no federal law allowing this.
Yeah, Bob, you would expect the way that the services are structured. You have a judge advocate general for each of the services, and then for the Department of Defense, you have the general counsel, and you would expect that the Office of the General Counsel would have rendered an opinion as a predicate for the announcement of a policy like this, because you have to have authority. You have to have lawful authority to expend funds. And there is something called the Anti-Deficiency Act, which is a very heavy-handed federal statute that provides very severe penalties for spending funds without having appropriate authorizations for them. And now I noticed, I was very aware of the Hyde Amendment, and I think, probably you could put the Hyde Amendment on your gravestone when your heirs 100 years from now go to look and say, okay, this is Delegate Marshall's the tomb, and it would say, he created the Hyde Amendment, and how many thousands and tens of thousands of Americans are alive today because you did that. But I'm very aware that's sort of foundational piece of the defense budget. The defense budget only lasts for 2 years. It's always we start in a new Appropriations Act, and this is a cornerstone of it. But you also mentioned 10 U.S. Code 1093, and what is that reference to?
It specifically talks about what procedures are authorized, and you can't go beyond. In other words, abortion was allowed, and Bill Clinton expanded it from life of the mother to these other two sexual assault exceptions. But beyond that, nobody's been able to go add more exceptions on this. So you have a very clear federal law passed by Congress, signed into law by previous presidents, that beyond life of the mother and rape and incest, you may not use federal funds for these purposes. And Biden people are doing it for three ways: paying for the abortion, paying for travel, and giving time off for people to do this. So this is all heavily tax subsidized, and I haven't seen one survey, I think, since 1976, when the Hyde Amendment first passed into law, that there's a favorable view that people want tax money to pay for abortion. I've got a letter here, a press statement from a congresswoman from Alabama, Terry Sewell, and I suppose she's pro-choice, she's a Democrat, but she wrote a blistering statement condemning the action of the Biden administration. And let me quote you from this. She says, "The administration's decision to keep Space Command in Colorado bows to the whims of politics over merit. Huntsville won this selection process fair and square based on the merits. In 3 separate reports, Huntsville reigned victorious, whereas Colorado did not come in second or even third. This reversal is as shameful as it is disappointing. I expected more from the Biden administration. A decision of this magnitude should not be made about red states versus blue states, but rather what is in the best interest of our national security." Now, this is a Democrat congresswoman, and she's basically saying you can't put abortion access over protecting the lives and liberties and property of Americans. But sure looks like Biden has done that. And this is even more interesting. I have a copy of a letter here. This is from the head of the Armed Services Committee. It's Congressman Mike Rogers. And he's written to Frank Kendall, Secretary of the Air Force, and the head of the Space Command, General Dickinson. And he's asked them, just give me, the committee, the rationale for your conclusion here. Because the reason this was inspected further by the Office of Inspector General and the General Accounting Office is because when Colorado was the de facto location of the Space Command, when the law was passed under Trump to establish a new branch of the armed services, the Air Force was established in Colorado. But they then complained that moving it to Alabama was political. Sorry, the examination came back, and by all the metrics that you have, Alabama's Redstone Arsenal was the place to have this. The reason I would suggest, and NBC mentioned this a little while ago, is that the Biden administration wants to make sure that women have access to abortion. Well, what's the difference between Colorado and Alabama? In Colorado, and this is from Planned Parenthood, there's no gestational age restriction on abortion. In other words, it's not 12 weeks, it's not 20 weeks, it's not 24 weeks, it's 39 weeks, all the way through pregnancy. A doctor does not have to do the abortion. Any person who's whatever they call a qualified health personnel may do an abortion. And Colorado has a law providing that people who want to pass out literature to people going on the way to abortion, they may be subject to litigation. And they also have what's called a shield law, where they protect abortion providers in Colorado from providing abortions, say, to minors from a state where it would be illegal, that you don't have to respond to subpoenas. You can't be criticized or brought from Colorado to another state. Alabama, on the other hand, has more restrictive policies on abortion. The state constitution says there is no right to an abortion. Patients have to wait 48 hours before you can have an abortion. Medicaid coverage is largely banned, except for very limited circumstances. Medication abortions, drug abortions, must be done in person, not over a teleprompter. And so it has to be also provided by a doctor. You can't have the pharmacist give you these pills, like that. Parental consent is required for abortion. And this is, again, it's much more restrictive. It clearly looks.
Bob, it's interesting that in reading all of the reports in the news media about this, they always focus and they say this Senator Tuberville he's blocking all these promotions in the military. He stopped the appointment of a new chief of staff of the Army, a new head of the Marine Corps. Soon it'll be the Navy. And what they're missing is that he is not the problem. The problem is the Biden administration, which has clearly prioritized and said, we don't care what happens to the military. We are going to engage in this killing of children. And from the article that you wrote, apparently the estimate is that the number of abortions could soar by something like 50 times if the law were liberalized in the way that is anticipated by the Secretary of Defense. But it just makes you wonder, how essential are these generals? There are 231 of them that are being held up. Is it really worth it for the Biden administration to attempt to override the law and the Constitution in order to provide this, and to use leverage of the entire military to do it? Because Tuberville, all he's saying, I think, is you've got to obey the law. The President of the United States cannot appropriate funds. He cannot violate the Hyde Amendment. He cannot violate the federal statute that you said that limits the way that money can be spent on abortions. And he's simply saying, look, this is really important. I think we have the right to override the law and the Constitution and the procedure for appropriating money. And if Congress won't go along with it, then we just throw the military overboard just so that we can show that we're really peeved. That seems to be what they're doing.
There's only one thing I can add to that. I didn't mention earlier, but there's a law which was passed, I guess, in the late 1870s or whatever, called the Assimilative Crimes Act, and it's still existing, where Congress stated that where there's a military fort, say in a base, in a state that has certain criminal statutes, the criminal law of that state, in the absence of any federal law specifically applying, will apply to the territory of that fort. So if there's a hospital in that military base, they can't do things that would violate the criminal law, say, of Alabama. If they are, and again, I haven't done a FOIA request on this, but I suspect because this problem was raised and no answer has been forthcoming, that they're violating that law as well and are shielding abortionists within the military from the normal effects of the criminal law of that state. So this is, again, another way that they're just thumbing their nose and making some abortion some super right, not just a right, a duty of the rest of us to support and secure. I really reject this kind of thinking. and it does no good at all. So you've got two things going on. You've got all these nominations held up, and they're only being held up because, as Senator Tuberville has stated, Secretary of Defense Austin is breaking the law. He obeys the law. He's going to pull this hold away, and they can clear all these nominations in one day. But Biden doesn't want to do that. He is hanging tough on this abortion policy for some reason. And then you've got the placement of the Space Command. Your viewers really need to write and call their member of Congress, their House representative and their two senators, and ask them, do they agree that the General Accounting Office, Defense Department Inspector General's Office, the recommendations they made for the base selection should be overturned for a preference to finding states where abortion is more liberal? I mean, just put it that simple, because you talked about the power of the purse, and James Madison basically said this is the most effective power for a redress of any grievance you have, that you're not going to spend money for a certain policy. You need to call today your member of Congress and ask them what they intend to do about Biden's action in not obeying the law on the Hyde Amendment, and two, violating the recommendations of their own professional departments in placing the Space Command in a state that wasn't even one of the top 15 recommendations. I mean, you had these evaluations go on, and again, there was one that was conducted because the Colorado delegation said Trump is doing this for political purposes. Well, turns out that he did it, and all the agencies, the review agencies, agreed the best place to have this is Redstone Arsenal in Alabama. So ask your congressman and senator, are they satisfied that Biden is using American tax money to the best purposes to defend our country, to defend the lives of everybody here against invasion from space or destruction?
Sure.
And if not, what do you intend to do about it? You're sent there to Congress to secure the common good. Securing the common good doesn't mean putting abortion access over protecting the lives of Americans.
I have several good comments from Darren Mahoney, who writes in and says that he believes that the Supreme Court ruled appropriately on abortion in the Dobbs case, and I think that the essence of the Dobbs case was that the Supreme Court, when it ruled in Roe versus Wade, did so without the slightest fragment of authority or historical record to support the idea that somehow abortion was a constitutional right. It clearly was not. It was a crime, I believe, in every state at one point, and it was never given to the federal government to legislate in the area of abortion in any event. So I certainly agree with Darren on that. The Dobbs decision was kind of a slam dunk. It was a move towards getting the nation back into compliance with the laws and the Constitution. And this is another instance where we see with the Tuberville thing, where what he's doing is not very radical. He's just saying, I'm not going to vote and give my consent to have all of these military nominations passed in a block as long as is being combined with this this practice of child sacrifice or abortion, whatever you want to call it, without any lawful authority, without any source of appropriations that can be found in the law or the Constitution. So it's an interesting situation. And I note here we are at a time where the United States really seems to be losing a lot of its moral authority across the globe. The nations of the world seem to be kind of rising up and saying, the U.S. is not a good leader. It's not consistent with sort of moral values. And so I noticed, and I was sharing with Delegate Marshall earlier that in one of the republics of Russia, they have just enacted a law creating a criminal penalty for promoting abortion or encouraging abortion, certainly for participating in it, but even for favorably commenting on it. And Bob, you had mentioned a Virginia law that seemed to correspond to that.
Up to 1975, which was 2 years after Roe v. Wade, Virginia had a law in effect that prohibited, within the confines of the Commonwealth, abortion advertising. And that was, unfortunately, it was struck down because in light of Roe versus Wade, you couldn't have any restrictions on it. But that was the same premise, the same idea, the same application, that you're not going to allow pro-abortion propaganda to be disseminated to assist people who want to engage in this kind of activity. Senator Black, I hope you can put a link to the article that I wrote on your screen so your viewers can read the article and then be informed and call their member of Congress or House or Senate to say, hey, what are you doing to stop Biden from breaking the Hyde Amendment and from locating the Space Force in an area that was not recommended at all in any sense by these, it was so far down the list, you might as well say it was off the list, for the headquarters for the Space Force. I mean, this affects us. Regardless of what you think about abortion, Biden made this decision, and it sure looks like it was predicated on access to abortion and not the best interest of protecting our lives, our future, our businesses, and our families. This has got to stop. The only way it can stop is if Congress puts an appropriation amendment on the Defense Department appropriations bill saying you're not using any money to keep Space Force in Colorado because it did not meet the metrics of evaluation by the appropriate agencies. And again, you and I we're only powerless if we don't let our member of Congress know this. So I hope you can, so I'm not conversant with the technology you have there, but if there's any way you could let your viewers know how to access this article and then it just says what to do right there. Call your member of Congress on these 2 points. This is critical.
Yeah, and once again, the article was published in Catholic Culture, and this was back in March, I believe.
May 24th.
May. Well, I remember very well when this all came about, and it was in all of the uproar about the Dobbs decision and the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which I think will go down in history as one of the most evil Supreme Court decisions ever enacted. It had no lawful authority. It violated all of the fundamental ideas of the U.S. Constitution. That and in the uproar over this, Biden, who is a zealous adherent to abortion, who knows, maybe because of his son Hunter and all of his wild flings around the world, maybe they try to get the kids aborted after he gets himself in trouble. But in any event, that's their personal business. They do what they're going to do. But but don't impose that on the military. But I remember one of the things they wanted to say, okay, well, we'll show you, you can't make us comply with the law. We're going to do this. We're going to make a decision in the military where they're going to follow the chain of command. And like you said, they did not point to any lawful authority, anything within the Constitution or the laws of the United States that empower them to enact the rule that they did. And so it's clearly unlawful. I don't think there's any question. If you really stop talking about, well, how many promotions do we need? And you say, okay, do you have the lawful authority to kill children through abortions using taxpayer money? And the clear answer to that is you absolutely do not. It's not a close call. It's not an arguable issue. It is flat illegal. And what they're doing is illegal. And the denial of all the promotions and the denial of sending the Space Command to the best location for the Department of Defense, all of these things are just based on absolute violation of the law and the Constitution by an administration whose actions are very much characterized by disdain and contempt for our system of law.
Well, I mean, you're right. The fact that there is no legal opinion from the Office of General Counsel, to me, is a glaring weakness and a kind of a silent admission that they have no authority to do this. They just want to do it because they're in charge, supposedly. So, but again, we can still respond back and ask our member of Congress, what are you doing to stop this? And, say, show me what you're doing. Show me what appropriations amendment you're drawing up to prohibit this from proceeding. If we don't do this, if Congress doesn't rein in an agency that has absolutely no authority to do these things, what else will they blink at if they don't stop this?
I think that's true. And it's a little bit shocking that in all of the discussion, the discussion does not revolve about the issue of what is the lawful basis for doing this? What is the source of funds that you're going to draw on that does not dramatically violate federal law and the Constitution? And there isn't one. So, well, in any event, Bob, I very much appreciate you being on with us today. I appreciate your deep insight into this and the fact that you have devoted much of your life to defending the unborn. And I think things are moving in a very positive direction in this area, and hopefully we will see the administration drop their insistence on violating the law in order to, achieve a political goal. So, do you have any final remarks before we close out?
Well, I thank you for putting these programs on, and I hope you continue to discuss public policy issues so we may have a better informed electorate.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. Well, this has been Dick Black, Senator Black, with Focus on the News. We will see you next Monday.